Welcome back to the Existential Lounge. This is episode 10, made it double digits. Pretty
That's
awesome.
milestone. Let's go.
That is a
Keep it
milestone.
rolling.
Feels good, feels good. Today we're going to be talking about the ever elusive, been studied and tried to figure out since the dawn of humanity is happiness. It feels like it's something that's right there, but like you think about it and it's like, I don't even know what I'm talking about when I say happiness. It's strange. We're going to be talking about mindfulness. We believe an absolute integral element to attaining happiness. And we're going to be dabbling a little bit into depression, our own experiences with it.
Mhm.
It's something that most people experience at some point in time in their lives.
I would say it's not even a stretch to say all people.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I
I,
think that
I,
makes
I
sense.
agree in the idea of like to refrain from speaking in absolutes, but I think that
Yeah.
it's safe to say that's an all people
So
phenomenon.
many ways that could trigger it. It seems
Yeah.
like it makes sense that it's this.
And I think that there's a stigma that like depression is like, oh, you're this sad emo boy or something like that. But like,
Yeah.
no, this is a thing that we all experience. Like, life doesn't go the way that we want it to go or expect it to go ever.
Yeah.
So that reality hits people really hard, and
100%.
it's something that everybody experiences.
Yeah.
So I think working to elevate and move away from that stigma, I think elevate was the wrong word there, but move away and rise above that stigma is something that we should all work towards. It's okay to say that you felt depression, that you had it, and that you experienced that.
100%. It's like it's an emptiness from a need. You have a need, and that need isn't being met, and it's a profound need, something that really
Mm-hmm.
has to do with big elements of who you are as a human, and you're missing out on
100%.
those things that like breathe life into you. You don't have enough of that. You're gonna feel empty. It really like emptiness is I think one of the best words to use synonymous with depression.
Yeah. Also, I think we'd be remiss to not mention we're in a completely different area than what you guys are used to seeing us in. I know we're usually inside, but life happens. Sometimes you don't make it to the recording area, and here we are. So
it feels nice, honestly.
It does.
Recording outside, there's something about the openness that I'm really enjoying it.
I just hope that the audio sounds good.
Yeah,
which I think it will, but that's it.
Yeah, we'll be good. But yeah, happiness. It's weird. There's a distinction between happiness is not pleasure. Pleasure is just things that feel good in the moment. Usually, watching a movie that you can feel pleasurable, or eating ice cream, whatever it may be. But there's a difference between that and happiness. What would you say are some distinguishing elements between that?
The Actually, no. I was about to say that the momentary nature of pleasure, but in reality, they're both momentary. Both are these fleeting things that just kind of hit us in a moment and gone the next.
Yeah.
But I think that happiness has more to do with when you find something that has to do with your purpose, something that fulfills you, right? Whereas pleasure seems to be these more like hedonistic, come and go type of happiness, like you just said, eating ice cream or something like that. Those things that are momentarily and don't really serve a purpose towards that fulfillment.
But someone eating ice cream would say, "I'm really happy right now. I've got my favorite ice cream."
Yes, but what is that doing for you in the long term? I think.
But is it contingent upon like long term elements, or could it just be like, hey, I feel good doing this, and this is right now. I feel happy eating some ice cream, just hanging out.
Yeah.
Maybe that sort of context is something that someone really needs. Maybe I think that it's like a mini fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's hard to say. I feel like fulfillment can be this like overarching thing, and happiness are like little blips of a fulfillment that kind of come into play. Like right now, like you could be doing something that makes you happy, but you're not fulfilled with your life. But the thing that's making you happy is something that checks off this, like it strums this chord within our souls that aligns with what we need in a given moment, or what satisfied some type of itch. I think that kind of opens the doorway to different kinds of happiness, right? Because we have the pleasurable happiness, which is fine, and then we have that type of happiness like this, for instance, like eating ice cream and doing what we're doing now would feel very different. We'd be happy eating some ice cream, but like there's a more profound sense of happiness that's coming from this, I'd say.
Like that's what I was trying to touch on earlier, where I said that I think happiness is something that works towards that inner fulfillment, finding that purpose, where ice cream doesn't necessarily do that. This, I think, has a higher threshold almost that it meets, to where it makes you feel like you're serving towards the real you. Do you see what I'm saying?
So when someone says that they're happy in a moment eating ice cream, would you say that they're misusing the word, or
I
how would you describe that?
I think that they're like, let's be honest here. Nobody's going to be walking around policing the use of happy
Of
and
course, of
pleasure,
course, of course.
but um, and I also don't think that it's realistic to expect people to like say, it's a pleasure to eat ice cream today, as opposed to I'm happy eating some ice cream. But I think in the specific realm here, where we have to like hyper um, define words in order to like get our point across, there is use in saying that happiness. Let's refrain from using happiness in those more hedonistic goods.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that like situating ourselves in a way that feels, see, content, because content is another word that is different from happiness.
Yeah,
That seems like it could. They seem kind of like a smoothie blend of the same words that are used in some circumstances but not others. And
well, with contentment, I think that that one's more of reaching almost a
larger scope.
existence equilibrium.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
So would happiness be a momentary equilibrium?
no, because the happiness, we have to realize that our equilibrium isn't going to be a good, and it's not going to be a bad either. It's that existence of neutral. It's
And
neutrality.
happy is the
Yes, happy is
yeah,
the
yeah,
mountaintop, sadness is the trough,
yeah.
back to mountaintop. But like the truth is that throughout 70 some years on average that we're on this planet, we're not going to be on either one of those two ends for the majority of the time. We're going to be sailing through the middle, and that's what
Correct.
contentment is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely, we have to cultivate those tools to help us to stay there. That requires consistent practice. We don't want to leave, you know, we don't want to leave it up to luck to whether, oh, we're happy today and we're okay tomorrow. It's important to make sure that we're exercising uh, disciplinary tool sets, stoic mindsets,
Mm-hmm.
and regular things like exercise and sunlight and in proper dietary
You
nutrition.
know what I think, now that you say stoicism here, I think that a good way to look at it is that happiness and sadness, those that mountaintop and that trough, are situations where we're allowing the outside to influence the inside, right?
Yeah,
Contentment is the inside taking control and saying, this is where I'm at. This is my normal. This is where I'm going to be. And the other things, they'll come and go, right? But it's essentially taking the power back of the outside event. People who try too often to exist on the mountaintop on a regular basis are allowing their happiness to be dependent on outside events, and people that exist on the lower, on the troughs on a regular basis, are doing the same, just in a negative world, where they're allowing everything that they every displeasure that happens to keep them down there. But when you intrinsically find that, again, for lack of better words, tough to use the word in the definition, but when you find that internal contentment, those two things, they don't pull you as much as they do
yeah,
before.
absolutely. And we need to do that in order to, I think it helps to lead a life that's a little bit more predictable or that we have more control over.
Control, I think, because
Yeah,
predictable takes away that spontaneity of life. I don't know if that's a
yeah,
word. Um,
spontaneity.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think that what I meant by prediction is that you can know within yourself that if someone cuts you off, you're not going to freak out.
yeah. So,
And
like I said, it's control. That's that
correct.
control of
Yeah,
your
but
disposition
to a
towards
degree
the
though,
outside world.
because we have more of that control, it kind of makes our emotional reactions more predictable in that sense.
Yeah,
I think that that's specifically what I meant by that word in that context. But see, in doing that, that helps us to be happier more frequently because we're knowing how to
no, I think you're
maneuver
getting no, no, no. You're
ourselves.
doing the thing um, where happiness is the end goal. I don't think that allows us to be happy more often. I think it allows us to be content more often, which in turn allows us to maneuver around the happy and the sad
So
better.
what I would say is that I think that through certain mindfulness practices that through gratitude, through looking for certain details in life that maybe we weren't looking for originally, that we can find happiness from that we wouldn't ordinarily have if we weren't looking for it. In the same way as when we're trying, you're thinking of a certain number, a certain color. If I'm thinking of
Hmm.
red, I'm going to keep seeing red everywhere. I think there are certain ways to wire our brains to pay attention to certain details and extract information from life, that we're on
Hmm.
certain frequencies of thinking and perception that lend us to be more happy than sad because of the type of things that we're in alignment with. Does
See,
that make sense or
I
no?
see what you're saying, and I agree with the principle. What I'm having issue with is the usage of word.
Okay.
So I don't think that our goal should be to be happy more often than to be sad. That's the running. What's the like the carrot on a stick thing that you're
Correct.
never going to reach.
Yeah.
So you're never going to actually be happy if your goal is to reach happiness.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying, is to refrain from using happiness as the end goal. Happiness is a thing that we will experience in the constant ebb and flow of living.
Yes. Correct. I agree.
The end goal is contentment.
Yeah. I think that that's so much more sustainable.
Yes.
I think that is much more sustainable. I agree with that entirely. Um, I think that that is another whole can of worms where we need to have a proper balance of the strums that which fulfill us on a
Yeah.
regular basis in order to become with like get to that contentment, because yeah, we could be sad in a moment, we could be happy in a moment, but at the end of the day, if we're content,
Mm-hmm.
that we want to be able to withstand sadness. We
Yes.
were speaking earlier about like a ship and being able to, like, yeah, there's going to be rocky waters and smooth water, rocky waters, or rocky and just like big waters, and we want a ship that can withstand that. And
Right.
um, it's important that we cultivate a ship that, you know uh, our lows aren't unbearable,
Right.
and our highs, we can squeeze the juice so much more
Mm-hmm.
from the highs, the happiness, because being more mindful, being more present during them.
Yeah. So
um
something I want to quickly define for the
yeah.
people listening is the idea of strums. I'm pretty sure we've touched on it before, but this is more of like a me and Brandon have come up with this system of being able to keep a consistent mental level,
Yeah.
and that's strumming chords or like guitar chords of the song that will eventually make you happy.
Yeah.
So just to like clarify, that's what we mean when we say more of those strums, is do more of the small things in your everyday life that cultivate towards a higher balance.
Yeah, each strum is like a thing that makes you happy, and without enough things making you happy, you can't be content in life.
Exactly.
Being content in life is a byproduct of a multitude of music happening, and you being happy is your song of life, your
Yeah,
whole, and
and
do you
I
like.
think that when we're regularly working on these strums, what we're really doing is we're building guardrails on that really thin road of contentment that exists in the like spectrum of happy to sad.
Yeah.
There's a really, really thin road of happiness or of contentment, I'm sorry, that exists for everybody. And that road is so thin that it's easy to fall off of, and people don't do the mental work to build the strums that eventually build those guardrails in that really thin road.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to say here, is that you want to keep strumming those strums and keep doing it until those guardrails are good enough that when you're not in the mountaintop of the happiness, you're not falling all the way to the trough. That valley
100%.
is not going to hit you
Yeah.
because those guardrails are there on that thin road of contentment.
Exactly. So regarding happiness and creating that distinction from, because it's a form of pleasure.
Yeah.
Happiness is a form of pleasure. um, and we can define the type of it into, like, life fulfilling happiness, and then there's like that pleasurable happiness,
Right.
right? um, I guess just making that distinction is just important, and to recognize which one you're engaging in when you're engaging with it.
Yeah.
And to listen, because the ones that are going to be that overarching happiness, that's going to help a lot with, there's going to be a little flag that goes off in your head: do more of this,
Mm-hmm.
do it more, find a way to be more consistent with it, maybe turn a career into it or whatever. I think that,
Even hobbies, because I feel like I
yes.
agree that a career is maybe the most optimal, like
Yeah,
find your pleasure in your
idealistic.
career,
Yeah.
but find hobbies that strum those chords on a regular basis, because sometimes we have these hobbies that realistically, like just the way that the world is, it's not like this super well, stuff never works out mentality, but just a realistic mentality that the world doesn't always work the way where we can translate our hobbies into a career,
Correct.
right? So just find those everyday things, that those little hobbies that strum guitar chords and strum guitar chords until so that they can help build up that level of contentment.
100%. I think something that um everyone falls prey to is the idea that like when you're not happy, when something undesirable happens, something's going wrong in life.
Mm-hmm.
And like to a certain extent on a surface level, yeah, it seems that way. But really this is just part of the game. This is just part of the the coding that's baked into what you're going to experience as a human, as
Yeah.
anything. Um, and sometimes we just need to smile at it. I know that seems difficult and seems crazy sometimes. Something's going wrong. Oh no, like, and the smile at it. Um, but it's part of that process. And I think that recognizing the absolute essential nature of that thing and the utility of it, that it's going to benefit you in some time, and that you've dealt with a million horrible things in the past as well, that this is just going to enable you to be better in the future. I know that's
Yeah,
like
well,
a
that's an idea that we touched a lot on the episode of
yeah,
failure, and
100%.
that's just that stoic practice of reframing your perspective on events. So events are always going to happen, and the impact they have on your life is predicated on your perspective of said events.
Yeah,
That's just always, it sounds simple to say and it's hard to do, but it's something that we have to try. I think
correct.
that's the best way to put it. Is just, it's sounds simple, it's hard, but we got to do it.
Yeah, we do. um I think it's it can be really difficult to find what fulfills us in life, and I think that that boils down to enough trial and error. I think that oftentimes we need to try a ton of things before we recognize what really resonates with us.
Yeah.
um, I think that we can get caught up in things that make us happy on that hedonistic level,
Hmm.
and a lot of the times we're going to realize the things that make us feel happy on that much deeper, profound level, the eudaimonia level, is usually going to require more work. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, maybe learning an instrument is going to feel a lot better than, um, I don't know. I'm going to use the eating ice cream thing again. Like,
Mm. I think for me, I guess to just make it a little more personable is, or not personable, but personal,
yeah,
um, is video games. I think that video games is a quick and easy dopamine rush for me. I can play them on end and just turn my brain off, but those don't actually have that fulfillment that I want from something I work towards,
yeah,
right? I haven't even talked to you about this much, but something that I've been wanting to start doing and that I've actually started is writing. I want to like just write fiction, and it's one of those things that it's hard. It's not something easy to do. World building is not an easy thing.
correct.
Creating characters that each sound and exist independent of me and seem like their own entity. That's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that I think is an outlet that I can do, one of those strums, like we keep saying, that does help towards that more all encompassing happy.
Yeah, I think there's a quote by Marcus Aurelius where he says, um, look at the things you're doing in life and ask yourself if death is dreadful because you wouldn't be able to do those things anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think asking ourselves, what are the things we're doing on a daily basis that death is one day going to take us away from? What what makes death a dreadful thing? And usually those are the things we should throw ourselves into, drown ourselves in those things that are, because that in making death a dreadful thing, it's meaning it's making life a beautiful thing, and you're going to want to stay
Yeah,
there and
it's
connect
that
to it.
dichotomy of good and evil.
Yeah,
It's the one can exist without the other. So being able to identify, sometimes it's hard to see the good. Sometimes it really is. So I think a good practice is, it's in a very bleak way. I think maybe it's a survival thing, maybe it's a biological thing that we have to survive. It's easier for us humans to see the bad quicker than it is to see the good. So I
yes,
think sometimes focus on that. Like there's utility in that. That if we identify the bad, it sometimes clears the clouds around the good.
Absolutely. It makes sense too that we see the bad before the good, because survival, things
Exactly.
that may be a
Yeah.
danger or threat to our existence.
So sometimes when it is hard to see the good, try focusing on what the bad is, and that will clear up what the good is.
Absolutely. I think that that opens the doorway a lot to mindfulness,
Yeah.
where how can we be perceptive of what's going on in here, and how in here is computing what's out there, and what further develops our relationship with the external world.
Hmm.
I think that we have to ask ourselves, how frequently are we really tuning into our own minds? It's so easy to be lost in the external world because we're interacting with it all the time, that like we forget it's just as important to interact with the internal world, and it's going to tell us a lot about who we are and what we truly want.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes we can fall prey to falling into what we should want to want, or what we feel pressured to do, rather
Hmm.
than what is genuinely motivated from within ourselves, and what our most authentic self truly desires from
Hmm.
life. Um,
Um, so we're diving into mindfulness now. I think something that would help the audience out is if you define what a mindfulness means to you.
Mindfulness means being attentive to the never ending ebbing and flowing of emotions, thoughts, um, and sensory perceptive experiences
Hmm.
pertaining to life. It's a whole blend of things. The We have to be attentive to the internal voice that is always speaking. It is
Yeah.
always examining our reality. It's always um, throwing our insecurities into our faces, and making us project them into social circumstances that are we are not realizing if we're not
Hmm.
aware enough. Um, how we're physically feeling. Maybe I've put off the fact that maybe my lower back hurts, and it just becomes a normality, and it becomes such a normalcy, and that I just perpetuate through life, and one day it feels like, whoa, my back's really hurting. I need to do something about it, and I've been ignoring it. It becomes like a normal.
Exactly.
So many things, that there's a world within us, and I think that those elements right there kind of like pinpoint the main things that we need to listen to on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think that the thing that keeps coming back to mind when we talk about mindfulness is that quote that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Correct.
It's that we too often pacify existence.
Yeah.
We kind of just lay back and let the waves take us where they're going to, and that it it's even I'd be hard pressed to call it living. I'd be hard pressed to call it more than just vaguely existing, maybe.
It's perceiving. I think it's kind of like you're watching the movie rather than playing a part in it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're in the crowd, you're not on the stage.
Exactly. And that's why that quote is something that I try to practice or try is always at the forefront of my mind on a regular basis, that the unexamined life is not worth living, because I really don't see a purpose if I'm not constantly um, almost under a microscope looking at my actions, looking at the way I think. Why did I just think this? Why did I just do this? Why
Yeah.
did I apply this tool here? Why did I not apply this one? Would this have been better if I had said this? All of these things are things that I might even be doing to a detriment, if I'm
I
being
was just
honest.
about to say that, like, it's wild how you can look at something so healthy, and then how it can turn into a detriment, and being unhealthy. You
Hmm.
examine too much, and it's like, well, now you stop living.
Yeah,
You can stop living both ways. By observing too much, you become paralyzed. By not observing enough, you're not in the world.
yeah.
um
Which then
and
brings me to the ideas of like virtue and in Nicomachean ethics, where it's like everything exists on that spectrum of uh, excess or depletion, and we
100%.
want to find that middle ground.
Yeah, a quote that is really similar to that, the unexamined life is not worth living, kind of reminds me of the Marcus quote, where he says, the first, this is honestly my favorite Marcus quote. It's the first rule is to have an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. I think that for me, that is such a beautiful guide to existence, because on one, it needs to be the first rule, that we keep an untroubled spirit, because we will not be able to see anything clearly if that's not the case. I think that through self-analysis we can recognize that, like, this might be an excess. If through the self-analysis I'm feeling a deep sense of discomfort, that could be the anxiety, over analysis that comes with it. Usually when we're doing something in excess, there's some sort of negative emotion that
Yeah.
is paired with it, that we can listen to through more looking, paradoxically enough.
uh,
um but and that quote just means so much to me,
yeah.
because only through being peaceful within ourselves can we see the world in a more clear light. And I think that we need to find that healthy balance between seeing deeply, but remembering that looking deeply is useful. Using a microscope is very useful for some things, but if I'm trying to look at the details of the moon, I'm going to need a microscope, or excuse me,
Mhm.
a telescope. Um, two different tools for two different forms of observing.
Yeah.
And through enough living and trial and error to be able to distinguish when to use either or.
And I think that's a good segue into looking at that very idea is we work so hard on an everyday basis. If we're following whatever regimen it is that works for you, we've preached the idea of the modern Renaissance man, all these different ideas of sharpening these our arsenal of tools for existing.
Yeah,
But all of that is for naught if you don't know which one to apply where,
yeah,
right? All of that does nothing for you if when um, someone around me needs to be hugged, I'm trying to solve their problems.
correct. Yeah, um, yeah. We need to really test enough. I think that you need to be fearless in the attempt of trying something. If something seems like it could work, try it. Just try it.
Mm-hmm.
The worst that could happen is realizing maybe you should have tried a different one, and really, we need to keep doing that. There's no other alternative between like trial and error, because if we just keep sitting and thinking, is this the right one? Is this the right one? And it could very well be.
Yeah,
The fact that you're hesitating is going to, you might end up needing a different tool by the time you've waited long enough, you know.
yeah.
um
But I think that there's utility in slowing down and looking
Absolutely.
at which one, like breaking before you just go in and jump in and see and try to apply one of your tools. Really take a second to like assess the situation. It's a thing that I personally have fallen victim to a lot in the past, is that I think I'm like most guys out there, very problem solving driven.
Yeah,
I want to solve issues. I want to when someone brings a problem to me, I automatically jump into like my handyman brain where it just wants to fix whatever problem it is. And a lot of times that has left the person who came to me still in want of that emotional support that they wanted. It's something that takes a while to learn, to know when someone needs help solving their problem and when someone just needs to be told that, hey, this problem isn't going to ruin your world. It's
yeah.
all right.
I think something that can help is definitely like, yeah, I mean, them asking questions, or honestly sometimes it's useful to even just try your best to make things explicit by asking, like, hey, would you like my advice, or do you just need me to listen? Because I'll be either or for you, you know.
Yeah, and I
um
think that's in an ideal world the best approach to take,
it doesn't
but
always work
it
that way.
doesn't.
You
It
need to
doesn't,
like,
and sometimes we got to play that societal game,
yeah,
right?
I
That
agree
like
fully.
I was supposed to know what was in your head already.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like there's minor context clues that we could use sometimes that could
yeah,
help us navigate that, though it's not always clear and easy. It's, they may be there. But yeah, again, that could be part of that trial and error. I have completely had those times where I should have just been that kind of hallway that someone just, echoes down, versus the I'm going to help you solve this right now, here's where you went wrong and this is what to do instead.
yeah.
um and you can, yeah, 100%. I think that um taking that practice is will help in that navigation there.
And this is something that I think applies to both men and women, but it's something that affects men at a much higher rate because
Correct.
we, one, have that disposition to problem solve on a regular basis,
Yeah,
and two, society tells us that we have to problem solve.
yeah,
So it's almost like we're in a situation where every single thing is leading to us using the problem solving skill, but then when it wasn't supposed to be used there, it's still on us, right?
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing I think about masculinity for sure, where it's we are manufactured in a sense in this way to want to problem solve all of these things, and
Yeah,
then we're confronted with uh, women. Oftentimes they like the emotional support,
yeah.
they like to be heard rather than critiqued in those senses.
You know, this whole thing that we're doing here, this whole show, podcast, YouTube channel, whatever you want to call it, it's at least I think I could speak for both of us. It's we want to help the world, and whatever thing we can offer, we want to offer it. And one of my biggest insecurities, in a way, about this whole thing is that I feel like you and I speak only to young men,
Mm.
and um, I wish that I had more insight or more ability to speak to those problems, but I don't. And in a paradoxical way, now I'm looking at it as I want to solve all the problems.
Back to square one.
Right.
That's funny, but we I mean,
Like, I feel like a lot of the times that we're using anecdotes and using our like experiences to offer some type of insight,
yeah,
it's insight that applies to men.
yeah,
And I think that we're leaving such a large subset of the audience that I also want to help. It's something I want to do. It leaves them in the dark when we're talking about something that they're not necessarily facing on a daily basis.
absolutely. I think that, like, especially in the context of men and women, women, their minds work I saw this crazy study, and I can't, like, I don't have all the information. I'm gonna, like, paraphrase, but there was something crazy about, like, they're through MRIs they're able to distinguish male and female brains at, like, a really early age. Um, without any more detail than just the way that, like, the brain
Hmm.
chemistry is, like, displayed, and that just goes to show how differently that, like, men and women can think. And
Yeah.
so many approaches that may be useful for women may not be for men, and vice versa. And we made this podcast in a way where we just want to touch on the things that we feel that we're most in a position to speak about. And we touched on before that, like, we're definitely gonna have women on that
Yeah, no,
we
we
can
keep
talk
like
about.
teasing this idea
Yeah,
of
yeah,
having
yeah.
guests. It's gonna happen.
It's
I
gonna
promise,
happen.
yo.
It's gonna happen. But yeah, I think that that's definitely gonna be the most optimal opportunity to do that. It's the best way to do it, you
Yeah,
know.
and honestly, you guys might just be tired of hearing us talk, and that would be the episode where we kind of just sit back and listen, because
Yeah,
it's where someone's talking out of position that we will never be able to properly, like, we can examine and learn and um, explain these things, but we'll never be able to do it from like a place of truly knowing that experience, you know?
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, I remember a long time ago we had that conversation about the
I
difference.
just thought about it too.
Yeah, that I don't know if you guys know about this philosophical, like, thought experiment of there's this woman that is, like, born into a black and white world, and but she's a color scientist and has, like, studied everything there is to know about color. Is there a difference when she goes out into, like, the real world and, like, sees color? Does something happen in her brain? But she knew everything there was to know about color, but then boom, she goes into a colored world.
I think what
um
sparked this conversation between you and I, which I'm sure most of you guys have seen, is the scene in the movie Good Will Hunting, where Robin Williams is sitting outside with Matt Damon,
yes.
and he's explaining to him, "Hey, you're a really smart kid. You know all these things,
Yeah.
but none of that's gonna happen until you experience it. You can read as many books as you want, but you'll
Yeah.
never know." And I think where I was coming from there was, again, that like very hardwired male brain of like, we can learn these things and therefore I can apply it and therefore I can solve the problem.
Yeah.
And to a degree, that's true. I think that research and books and reading have extreme utility in more practical and like maybe like technologically advancing way, where those things are more important in society building, in technology development, in getting us to Mars, and
Yeah.
that's that avenue where those things do take precedent. But what I was absent, and that back when we were, what, I was like 21 at that point, um,
I think so.
2021, was that I was failing to see the application of experience. I was failing to see how, at a more micro level, as opposed to the macro where the other stuff works at a micro level. When I'm talking to an individual, their experiences matter so much more than any book I can tell them about what they've experienced.
Yeah, it's like the difference between, reading Shakespearean novels and poetry, and then, about love, and then being
Yeah,
in love, and feeling loss, or whatever it may be. There's a different, I think, knowledge of the thing with, I think, what do you think, with emotional entanglement can deepen our wisdom
I
about
think
a
it can
thing?
deepen our wisdom, but it can also cloud our judgment.
I agree with that for sure.
Um, so what I think is that in the realm of problem solving, the books take precedent.
Hmm.
They do. So like if
Yes.
we're looking at, I don't want to get super controversial here, but like for example, racial tensions. I think that lawmakers of any race, creed, ethnicity can pass legislation that address the issues of racial tensions in the
Correct.
country
Yes.
if they've done enough research and all this. I don't think that experience is a prerequisite to pass that legislation,
Yeah.
but in able to understand your neighbor, your friend, your coworker, your anything stranger on the street that you spark conversation with, in order to understand them, I think their experience does take precedent at that point. I think that I will never be able to sit with someone who has experienced racial the byproduct of racial tensions in a negative light. I can never sit there. Well, I read this book about slavery. Like that's never going to be a thing that I can do.
Yeah.
So I think that's where they both have their avenues of where they have utility.
Absolutely. It's cool to see the development of how we're wired to think in that one way, and how we can still have that capacity to broaden with,
Yeah,
originally, just like, I remember your disposition towards that, and how that changed now. I think that's cool. I mean, we're so malleable with these things,
yeah.
and
That's the best way. I think that. Um, I don't know. I'm just a spark for some controversial stuff today, but
go
I think that
go at it.
I think that that's what is so much more beneficial about this outlook on life as opposed to a dogmatic one. Is that the allowing for change,
Yes.
the way that religion doesn't let you think otherwise. If a religion had said that we have to have either the book smarts aspect or the anecdotal experience aspect, we couldn't change. We
Mm.
wouldn't be able to say either of the other one, much like you just pointed out that I've had a pretty big shift in my perspective on that. And that's because my frame of thinking, that agnostic atheist point of view, allows for the malleability of opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's through, again, kind of like trailing back to mindfulness, is that
Yeah,
it helps
big
us to
segue.
a little segue, but we're always open to segues. It helps us to be more in tune with what we know and what we believe. I think that only by becoming more in tune with how we operate as people can we take the moment to actually change our ideas.
Yeah.
We can't change our ideas without being in tune and attentive to, like, what our brain constructed. We develop internal truths without ourselves even knowing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whenever you learn that the earth was round, there wasn't a moment when you're like, I believe this now. Like, you're exposed to information that,
Yeah.
based off of preconceived notions and the way that your mind contextualizes and programs information, that it pops out a truth or a falsehood, or I don't know what.
Oh boy, we're touching on racial tension, we're touching on religion, and now we're on the flat earthers. Everyone's gonna be coming after us after this one.
We're here for it. We'll have them on. That'd be fun. That'd be really fun.
Yeah. Hey, I'm out for hearing everybody out, but if you come on here and tell me the earth is flat, that's gonna be a short episode.
um, but yeah, I want to talk about ways in which we can exercise mindfulness in a practical daily way. Um, and for me, something that has been so mind blowing that I've been doing on a regular basis is open awareness. And it can be very difficult for some people to hyperfixate on a particular thing, like, looking at this soda can and picking out as much detail as I can about it. And then once I feel like I've gotten a lot of detail, go even further and further and further, and
Mhm.
try to find new details I didn't see before. But with open awareness, you recognize the consistent changes of consciousness, and you realize that consciousness is just this stage with an ever changing platform. And one moment you're aware of sounds or tastes or thoughts or feelings,
Mhm.
and it's always changing. And I think by practicing that on a regular basis, will really help you become more in tune with the world that's existing within you.
Yeah.
We're not taught, we're not told to, hey, listen to what's going on in you. There's a lot, and it doesn't stop, and it's always changing,
Mhm.
always.
Yeah.
And being a being's weird. It could feel, you could feel like a particular type of person 1 minute, and then like an hour later, you feel super different.
Yeah.
Um, there was this thing I really struggled with when I was younger, and it was this like odd feeling of being a being that like I didn't know how to wrestle with. I know we both kind of like struggle with that.
Definitely.
How being a being feels like this free fall, and like this soda can is existing in a kind of a set way right now, but like existence and consciousness really isn't. It's this like
Yeah.
thing. And that can feel like a struggle, because I think as humans we naturally want consistency, we want regularity, we want like, this thing is the same thing as it was, and there's a
I
normalcy
think
here.
that's why so often we historically have looked for patterns that aren't
Yes.
necessarily theirs because we want that level of consistency that makes us feel comfortable. The first thing that comes to mind, really on a roll today, but is astrology, where it makes sense that someone would want to think that personalities are set in a certain way because then
Yes.
we don't have to think about the fact that we're born with a blank slate and a super complex computer in our brain
Yeah.
that just picks up every single little thing that's thrown at it and somehow computes out the thing that we call
Yeah,
ourselves.
there are these preset things that you can just grab from, and you feel the comfort from like knowing that there's this universal consistency.
Mhm.
There's this thing that you ascribe to, but simultaneously connects you to tons of others. All these
Right.
Geminis are feeling like, oh my god, you're Gemini, me too, and instantly you're friends.
It
You feel
makes
like you
sense to want that
Yeah. And
cohesion.
you know what's interesting, I've thought about it a bit, but I don't think it's clicked in this way. Let me know what you think. Is we like consistency because if I know the travel patterns of deer, or the how certain plants grow, I'm gonna be able to do it all the time. I'm gonna be able
Yeah.
to recreate reality.
Predictability.
Yeah,
Predictability is the big thing there.
we need
We
that.
don't want that unknown because if you look at just survival, the unknown usually means death.
Yes,
So
yes,
we want everything to be known. We want to be able to explain everything.
yeah.
So those gaps of understanding are usually filled in by these uh, very
Religion,
yeah, all these different
or
things that we've
yeah,
touched on. Yeah,
yeah,
all these different things that don't really fully explain. We just kind of shove into that gap of knowledge because that gap of knowledge scares us.
yeah, 100%. Um,
What's that? There's a quote by this guy, this channel called Exerbia. He says, "I'd rather have uh, questions I can't answer than answers I cannot question."
yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I love that quote. That's
and
super good.
that's the thing here. They're looking at questions we can't answer and just filling them in with whatever because
Yeah,
they need something to fill that void.
yeah,
Whereas I'm like, I'd rather just leave it unanswered until we can actually answer
correct.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was thinking another really good form. We've definitely touched on this, but to reiterate, I think that every single person alive should own a journal.
Yeah.
Every single person alive. Life is too complicated. Your mind's too complicated. You need to put your stuff on paper. What I did recently. I like to write in my journal, and I usually never like read back. There's kind of like a release that happens in writing.
Yeah. I think I've only read back once or twice. And
It's crazy. It's crazy. You really,
I think that level of uncomfortability reading back is a reflection of that distance we have with ourselves, that
mm,
um, where you don't really know yourself. So it
yeah,
feels uncomfortable to look at these things because they're things that you want to ignore. What you usually put into this journal are things that you're done, you close that journal and that's separate from me now. But no, it's
Right.
not. You're tricking
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So reading back reminds you that's still there. It bothers you because it's true.
100%. I think that that is one of the most effective things. We've got to do that.
Yeah.
Non-negotiable. If you don't have a journal, buy one right now. Um, we have no link to a description. We're not not yet. We don't have a journal company, but get a journal.
Somebody wants to send us some.
Yeah, we will gladly do that. And if you don't know what to write, we were talking about this earlier. The effectiveness. I think this is a whole cool approach that like it's always good to go in with an intention when you're going to write something. You know, write about your day, write about what you're grateful for, write about something that's bothering you, whatever it may. Write about all of those. But oftentimes, try the approach where you have literally no idea what you're about to write, but let your hand just start writing words.
Yeah.
Just write whatever language you speak fluently. Go at it. Write random things, and what you're doing is you're literally watching in live action your unconscious mind bubbling
Yeah.
whatever contents exist within it to the surface.
Yeah.
I think rarely, I can't think of too many other like similar circumstances where we can do that. Where
There
we
isn't.
can like,
Unless you're just looking in the mirror saying words.
yeah, but like that doesn't feel the same because to see them and to be able to look
Yeah,
back is a whole
definitely.
different experience. It there's almost something surreal about it. And it'll tell you a lot. At first, it'll feel awkward, like I'm not doing this right or whatever. There's no right way to do it. You are trying to spill your innards onto a paper with a pen,
Yeah,
and
and I think that there's the truth for most of these things that bother us is that they're usually not the things we can see. They're not the things we can identify. They're not the things that are at the forefront of our mind. Our conscious mind is there and it's preoccupied with existing and functioning and going to work, getting your tasks done, making sure you ate today, making sure you showered, etc., etc. But the subconscious mind is what's picking up on all those little things that are bothering you, that are
yeah,
itching in the back of your brain. And those things, they're hard to write about because they're not in that forefront. They're not in that
yes,
conscious mind. So this practice where you just start writing air quote random things, you find out quickly they're not random because in reality your brain picks at the vaults of stuff that it knows.
that's the funny thing about therapy is like we need a person external to us to find what's inside of us.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting that like we need sometimes another person or some sort of tool to look within our own mind.
And
It's our mind.
yeah,
We live in it.
I'm no expert, so obviously don't take medical advice from me.
Or
But
me.
but I think that the reason that this exists even as a profession is because we are so devoid of the ability in society to have that introspective look.
Yeah.
I think if people were had the ability, if we were teaching kids, teaching everyone from a young age to start doing these things. Hey, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling that? What? How did this thing that happened the other day made you feel? All these different things. I don't know if there would be much utility in having that other person there because essentially their job is to be a really bouncy rubbery ball that lets you speak out your ideas and bounce it back to you until you understand it.
100%.
If we're able to do that on our own on a piece of paper,
yeah,
you don't got to pay $300 an hour for it.
definitely not. I do see the utility though, no matter what, still in people having knowledge or certain perspectives that maybe you didn't have that could help you
That's what
navigate
friends
through
are
things.
for.
Fair. Well, you got to rely on the friend being educated enough to be able to navigate
Get better
complex
friends.
issues sometimes. You know what? That's a good argument. That's a good argument. Fair enough. Uh, and I think it's, you know what, on that is important, and an important element to happiness is having those people around us that we can do that with effectively.
Exactly, yeah.
That really don't just like listen to what you're saying and go, that's crazy. No, but like people that actually listen to what you're saying and ask you challenging questions about it, that aren't afraid to like look at what you just said and really turn that stuff around and get you vulnerable and you know, and that
you want to get an awkward silence whenever you say something and someone says, yeah, that's crazy. Like, why is it crazy?
yeah, why is it crazy? Expound on that.
You know, that just reminded me of, you see those like short clips where people will go in like a Target or whatever, go up to a random person and they say some joke that doesn't make sense and the person will start laughing and they're like, you got it? And they're like, yeah, explain it.
I have not seen that.
Those are the most
That's
awkward
funny.
things. Like, because the joke wasn't supposed to make sense. They'll say something like, so cardboard. And then they'll both start laughing because the other person laughed just to to break the awkward.
That's when the person would just have to, enter the nakedness of like the human condition of the need to conform for the sake of inclusivity.
Yeah.
Imagine just answering with that. Like I felt pressured by my insecurity to belong, and so I laughed along.
Then we're just all awkward.
Yeah. Then honestly, the best way to combat something like is just being brutally honest. I found that honestly, uh, it's ironic I just said honestly there. Like the best way to combat awkwardness is just brutal honesty, and like by
nothing's awkward if we're just all like
honest about stuff.
just looking at it for the bare bones thing that it is.
Yeah.
Then it can't be awkward.
Yeah, when we need to play the social game, the person only gets awkward because they didn't want to admit the fact that like, why they said it.
Yeah.
Like that's like a thing you're not supposed to say, oh no, I fell in line with the game that we're all like the person asking the question would have done the same thing too.
Yeah, for all you guys that are having issues like approaching people, saying hi, making friends, or even like in a romantic sense, embrace the awkward. It makes conversation a lot easier. Yes. It makes people laugh. It makes them interested. Then just, how's the weather today? Like if you embrace the awkward, something weird happens, point it out. Don't try to make believe it didn't happen. Point it out and laugh about it. Yeah. It's such a better way to have conversation.
Yeah, that has helped me so much in life, and I've recognized at the times in which I do that, it you could literally after those moments feel the barriers of social distance that we have inherently with other people. They become broken down because people realize you're a person that accepts and acknowledges the things that we play a game to forget or not to look at.
Somewhere deep inside, everybody wants to do that, right?
100%.
Everybody wants this brutal honesty.
Yes.
But no one has like the balls, for lack of a better word, to do it.
Yeah.
So when someone does it, that actually makes you stand out, and it makes you the like person of attraction in the crowd. It makes you more approachable.
Yeah, it's like I'm thinking like you're on a date with someone and you're trying to like look all good and you're eating food and like you totally like miss your mouth or everything falls off the fork, and like rather than pretending like trying to play it off cool, like oh did she see that, and like that's gonna be weird.
That rib was really good.
Did you see that? I literally just missed everything on my fork. Like pointing it out just makes you instantly more likable. Also because it humbles you.
Yeah,
it points you out.
This air of like trying to be perfect. Like no, you're not. Let me break it to you. You're not. The person that's sitting having dinner with you isn't. Nope. The person that served you the food isn't. The person who drove you here isn't. Correct. All of that.
Yeah, and really, what we just said connects to a lot of the talking points we were just saying. Happiness. We become more in tune with ourselves, those around us, and we become increasingly more mindful to, rather than the things that we're trying to run from or hide or shy away from, we're bringing them out. And it helps you to really in a like a observable kind of way really see who you are and how you are.
Definitely.
I think another topic that we kind of wanted to dip our toes into a little, because it's definitely complex, it's very touchy for a lot of people, but it's something that both of us have quite a bit of experience in, is depression. And
we got experience.
Fortunately and unfortunately.
I find fortune in the unfortunate.
Yeah. It's definitely the byproduct of not having enough of those strums. And I think that one of the absolute best ways to counter it is if you're in a position where you're functionally a functional depressed person, right? Because there's a dysfunctional, like there's you are stuck in bed and there's no way to get out. I think that's a little bit harder advice. Definitely harder, because you could say, make sure you're getting sunlight, go on a walk, but like that person literally can't get out. I think
in those cases, that's where, again, touching on earlier, you got to have better friends. Someone's going to come pull you out. Like,
absolutely. And I think, depending on the severity, some professional assistance could definitely be useful. But
straight jacket your way out of here.
Straight jacket. Giving yourself to the inherent elements that rise us from the depths of water is going to be important. We need sunlight. We need a walk. We need to have conversation. We need to have healthy relationships. Exercise frequently. Read or do something that makes your life feel worth living. Um, I think that there's overarching big things. So, say, like, both of us really are not happy with the jobs that we have currently. Um, and that can make a really big draw on our mental health, because if we're really passionate people wanting to accomplish a lot and make big changes, that's taking a big blow from our mental health. And we can
Yeah.
suffer easily, very easily, slip off a mountain if we are not securing ourselves with the safety nets of feeling the satisfaction of learning new knowledge from a book, or watching a podcast, or getting sunlight, or making someone's day. We need frequent, consistent, a large plethora of things that keep us okay, to make up for the deficit
Yeah.
of how much a job that
Yeah.
means something
I
to
think
us
it
really
comes back
is.
to what we were talking about earlier with those strums, finding those things that do keep you level, keep you above water.
Yeah.
Um, it's something in a very bleak way, I guess. Something we touched on earlier today was that sometimes it can feel like no matter how much you're working, no matter how many strums you're strumming, no matter how much self help and personal development books you read, it feels like all of that is just enough to keep you on just the tip of your nose above the water line so you can breathe.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the hardest things, that there is no fix it all. There is no
There isn't.
thing that's going to make you spring out of the water.
Correct.
It's going to be an amalgamation, and a lot of the times it's going to feel like you're doing 1,001 things just to be able to breathe.
Honestly, it kind of reminds me of like how the body operates. Think of like how many functions are happening at any given moment just to keep
Mm.
you alive. It's insane. And sometimes it feels like the same way to be happy. I think that, each person requires a different amount of things that make them feel content or fulfilled, or
Yeah.
that they're leading a life worthwhile. Some people have standards that up here, some people have some that are here. To each their own, honestly. Like, the person like Diogenes that is okay with being in a barrel in the middle of the street, like pissing on himself, like, honestly, if that's fulfilling to you, power to you, as long as you're being ethical about it. But
Just don't
yeah.
don't do it on the bypassers. If you
Yeah.
do it on the corner, you're good.
um but Andres and I have pretty big standards in the way that we want to help the world, and when we don't feel that we're doing that, we feel a very big draw. And that is these are the symptoms of having high standards to wanting to be a great person. And to
Yeah.
be a great person isn't easy. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And um, I think sometimes you have to recognize that the suffering you're feeling is a symptom of chasing something worth chasing. Anything worth chasing is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Building something that leaves
I
people in
think it
awe
goes
is,
back to that idea that we were talking about early in the episode, that those pleasures that you didn't work for, they don't feel like a lot, right?
yeah,
It's the ones that you have to work for. So realize that the rut you're in, the hardship you're facing, is that work for that eventual good that is
yes,
gonna matter.
yes,
That is going to actually fill the void that you're trying to fill with playing video games, with I don't know, whatever other vice there is. Those This is what's actually going to fill the void, is the thing that you're working towards that is causing that current strife in your life.
yeah,
That's just a necessary step in the ladder of developing something that matters.
yeah. And that's when mindfulness comes into play, where you were bringing up something earlier that I freaking love, and it's just about pausing.
Yeah.
I think everyone needs to pause a little bit more. And if you pause before doing a thing, kind of like the whole we were also talking about grabbing a phone and immediately just going on it without
Yeah.
thinking. Um, Pause first before you do a thing sometimes, and ask yourself, does this serve me or does this not serve me? And it seems like the most basic thing to ask yourself. And it seems blatantly obvious that we should be doing this all the time, but we don't do it enough. We Most of what we do on a regular basis, like 90 something percent, is automatic. It's habit, it's instinctual, it's unconscious. We need to take time to pause, take it easy for a moment, and ask yourself, do I want to do this? I was watching a Chris video recently, and there was a guy on there saying that he did something really cool. He was saying that he was looking through his YouTube history, and he said like around 80% of everything he looked at was stuff that he's like looked back on, and he's I'm not proud of this. I didn't need this. This is kind of like just cheap, really like clicky stuff that's like
Yeah.
oh, whatever. And so he changed the algorithm on his YouTube feed. He like built some code and
You
like
know, that's
input it.
actually something that Instagram has put in. You can reset your algorithm.
No way.
Yeah.
To like explain a little more.
So I haven't
For
done it.
for
Or
anyone
haven't,
who has Instagram and doesn't know about it, or yeah, it does.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I haven't done it. I rarely use Instagram, but I read somewhere that there's like somewhere in the settings you can go now. If you don't like what's getting fed to you, you can essentially reset it to 0 and rebuild a new algorithm.
That's important. I think that like, yeah, that seems like a really good idea. That because otherwise people could get fed. As we change as people, it's hard to
Well,
find
those
new.
things are designed in that they change with you. So like,
Yeah,
if at some point you were really into sports and then you kind of start falling out of love with sports and stop looking at things that have to do with sports, the algorithm will start not feeding you sports anymore.
that makes sense. That makes sense. But that's cool though. Um, but yeah, we need to pause and recognize whether a thing is to serve us or not, and
Yeah.
um, that is that's going to give us more autonomy over how we live and what we're doing in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to fuel our capacity to be content and to find more happiness happening and to lessen those lows. You know, anytime I overconsume any sort of like easy pleasure, you just never feel good at the end.
Yeah, it's
You're
like
not
eating something
proud. You're
that's
not
like is not good for you.
100%. It's
Like
like
you
eating
just
a bag of
downed like
chips.
5 burgers, and then after a
Yeah,
while you're like, that feels disgusting.
honestly,
Got the meat sweats.
I do the 5 burgers, but no, definitely, definitely the meat sweats.
Yeah,
That's a thing. I don't
that
think
is
I've
a
ever
thing.
had that before.
I
How
don't
does that
know.
work? What is the science behind
I
that?
don't know what this. I think it's just because it's like really greasy, so it makes you like,
Ah,
yeah,
okay. You just sweat and grease.
yeah.
Fair, fair.
Your body needs to get all this crap you put into it out somehow, so
Yeah,
it sweats it out.
yeah. Um, yeah. What else? What else do we leave anything else that we should touch on?
I don't think so. I think that's about everything.
Yeah.
Uh, Thank you guys. I think
Thank
that's the
you.
first thing I want to say here. We started this, and I didn't think that, or no, scratch that, because we were pretty set on we're gonna get far in this. But being here now, we're at 10 episodes. It's not big for most people, most these huge channels, but 10 episodes is crazy.
Yeah,
We're here.
that is epic.
I guess in a way, this is chapter 1 of all of this. Let's see what the next 10 brings.
Definitely.
We're gonna have guests on. I promise you. All the people we took little jabs at today, I promise you, there's no hate in any of it. Come argue whatever you want to argue, unless you're a flat earther. Get out.
Yeah. Don't talk about it.
Or if you are, we'll have it outside again. We'll point to the moon and then just shut off the camera. But yeah, thank you guys, and thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys episode 11.
Absolutely. See you guys. Thank you.